Hi everyone, this is Jim. This is my round 4 game from the Western States Open played last weekend in Reno. You might ask what happened to round 3 since I previously did rounds 1 and 2, but didn't. Then I skipped to round 4. In round 3, I took a bye, and in fact, that had been part of my pre-tournament plan. I signed up for that bye ahead of time. My thinking is that well, it's a long tournament. It's going to be a difficult section, 6 rounds, where I'm, the lower rated. I'm in the bottom half of it, and so I'll be facing a lot of tough games, and I might need a break somewhere in the middle. So I signed up for that bye in advance. And as it turned out, I was happy to get the bye because that night, let's see, the first 2 rounds were played Friday at noon and at 7. And the last game was kind of a long game that actually went on quite a while. And so I didn't sleep all that well that first night, that Friday night. So I was a little tired in the morning. I was happy to lay around in bed. I goofed off in the afternoon, had an early dinner. And on Saturday, the rounds were at 10 and 5. So had an early dinner and then came in to play round 4 at 5 o'clock. So in round 4, for the first time, I'm facing a lower rated opponent, and I have the white pieces. So my opponent has a rating of 1800, and I have a rating of 1833. And so I kicked off with e4. He went e6, the French defense. So I was happy to see this. I always like playing the French defense from either side. It leads to interesting games. I went with d4. He went with d5. Go knight c3, and he goes bishop b4, the Winawer. So I have a special line that I play against the Winawer. It's not the most common way to play, but I think it's kind of interesting. The main line on the Winawer is first to play e5, because this pawn appears to be in a little bit of danger here, and then to play a3. But my line, and this I played this once by accident, and then I looked it up and I found out that this is kind of an old line. It was played in the 1930s against the Winawer. And I checked it out with the chess engine, and it seems quite playable. So I continued to just kind of specialize in this little obscure sideline of the Winawer. So you play a3, kicking the bishop right away. He takes. And now this pawn is hanging. And black can actually take it. And the way it usually goes is like this. This didn't happen in the game. I just want to show the main idea here. Queen g4 is a double attack. And if your opponent is not prepared for this, hasn't seen it before, they might make a mistake here. There's two ways you could play. You could defend the g-pawn, or you could defend the e-pawn. But the better way to play is to defend the e-pawn with the knight. I guess defending the g-pawn would be with a move like queen out here, and then you'd grab the center pawn, and white's actually quite a bit better in that position. So bringing the knight out is the way to play this. Kicking the queen, giving up the g-pawn and the king side, but the material is even. You've grabbed a center pawn, you've given up a wing pawn, and black is okay here, but well, it's an interesting position, and white is certainly okay as well, and still has some chances, maybe some slight opening edge. And so this is the position that I would be happy to play. Let's see. Instead of taking, though, he played knight to e7, which I hadn't seen before. And actually, I looked it up. It was the second choice in the opening book, so maybe he knew something about this opening. But I think he was kind of surprised by it, and he just came up with this knight e7 move on his own. Based on what he said after the game, he seemed a little bit surprised by this line. I went bishop d3 here. If I were to play e5, then actually that would transpose right back into a mainline Winawer. So I deliberately paused here and searched for something different. Like I said, I hadn't seen this before, so I'm on my own devices. And I thought, well, I've got the bishop pair and I've got open lines, so why don't I just go for simple development and allow any kind of opening of the position, on the theory that that would actually help me because I have the bishop pair, and so I kind of want open lines to make those bishops stronger. So just developed with bishop d3. He went with c5. And then on this same theory, I decided to just go ahead and take here, opening up the center. So now this looks a bit different. It looks a bit like an exchange French, where you take here right away. But, well, this knight would normally be played to f6 instead of e7 in an exchange French. and you wouldn't have this damaged pawn structure, and you wouldn't have the bishop pair. So I think this is like an improved version of an exchanged French. Although, well, the chess engine has some different opinions than what I do, so we'll talk about that a little bit here. So I was happy with this, and I just played knight f3. And this is where the divergence starts. So the chess engine, and also the book in the opening, the move in the opening book, is not to play knight f3, but to play d takes c5. And well, I thought about this move a little bit. I mean, d takes c5, you know, he's not defending that pawn right away, so maybe you can hold on to it for a little bit. But it just doesn't look right. You know, you have this tripled pawns. Even if you manage to hold on to it, is it all that great? And of course, you're delaying your development. But, well, the line goes like this. Knight d7, bishop to e3. So he's attacking the pawn. I'm defending it. Queen a5, coming out with a double attack, hitting both those pawns. That's why these pawns are, you know, not so great. One reason is that, you know, it's not so easy to hold on to them. So knight e2, defending the pawn on c3, and then knight takes c5. And the chess engine, oddly enough, likes this position for white. It thinks that's the way white should play, even though black can trade off and get rid of my bishop pair here. If he does that, it improves my pawn structure, I guess. And my development is not so bad. I've got all my minor pieces out. He's got his queen out. He still has to develop his bishop, and neither side is castle. So I would think this is about an even position. The chess engine gives a slight edge to white. The way I play it, actually, the chess engine prefers black. So we'll go on a few moves. You see, I played knight f3. My opponent went bishop g4. The main move here, actually, that's actually out of the opening book, although it's a logical move. But in the book and also the engine line is c4, just closing the center. And we'll get to that position in a bit because after bishop g4, I still don't take. And the chess engine all along is saying I should take that pawn. I castle. He plays knight b6. I go bishop e3. And now I really am thinking about taking that pawn. I've got my pieces all out. His knight is not going to easily round that pawn back up. And so he decides, I thought he might take, but he decided to push forward and close and knock my bishop back to e2. So, so anywhere in the last three moves, the chess engine says I should take that pawn each turn and that I'm better. But since that I allowed black to play c4, the chess engine says that black is better. Now, I actually disagree with this assessment. It's pretty rare that I'll disagree with the chess engine because because usually, well, the chess engine is obviously the stronger player. But in this case, I'm actually pretty happy with this position. And also talking to my opponent afterwards, he was pretty uncomfortable in this position. You know, he's got these knights that don't have any obvious targets. How is he going to get to these pawns? And I have the bishop pair. They're a little bit closed in at the moment, but, you know, I have two open files to work with, and I can push some pawns forward and maybe open up some other lines. So I would think that white has a long-term advantage in this position. That's my opinion. I just wanted to warn you, the chess engine thinks that black is better here. Not by much, so either way, it's still within the range of playable for both sides. Anyway, he castled. I kicked the bishop. The bishop dropped back to h5 and put my bishop on a better diagonal. Now it's outside that pawn chain and looking at a lot of squares here, a more active place. And I was also thinking about playing knight to e5 here. And my opponent played the move f6, which looks pretty strange to me. But, well, it was the top engine choice, too. I guess the threat of knight e5 is a little bit annoying, and black needs to do something about that. So f6 is the move. I went queen d2, I went queen d7, and I went bishop h2. I'm getting the bishop out of the way so that my queen can come out over to the king side. These squares are not available, of course, but maybe I could play bishop to, or queen to f4 is a possibility. Try and maneuver with the queen on the maneuver with the queen over here on the king side, maybe try and create some weaknesses. And the second idea is just to get the bishop away from any potential trades. He could have been thinking about playing knight to g6 there, hitting the bishop. So I'm just getting the bishop out of the way in advance. He goes rook a to e8. Cancel that. Rook a. Rook a to e8. Brought the other rook over. So yeah, both of us, I think, seem pretty confident the action is going to be, we seem agreed that the action is going to be over on the king side, and he's preparing for it. And but there is a tactic here. After rook a e8, it's white's turn to move. So, well, let's see if you can spot the move that I played here. It doesn't win material, but it's an interesting tactic, and I think it leads to a favorable position for me. So, so if you want to take a second, pause the video, see if you can spot the move that I play right here. Okay, I play the move knight e5. Boom. So it's a simple double attack. I'm attacking his bishop, and I'm attacking the queen. And I thought, well, this would get me the absolute bishop pair, and that's what happened here. And I think it happens in any case. He took with the pawn, f takes e5. I grabbed his bishop, and then he played g6 to kick my bishop. I dropped my bishop back to g4. I want to do this with tempo because I want to be able to grab this pawn before he has a chance to push it forward and close the center. I'm trying to keep things open, so that's a key to this sequence here. Let's see, he played knight f5, and I grabbed the pawn. So all this turned out okay for me. Actually, at this point, the chess engine changes its mind and starts to give the advantage to white. The advantage I thought I had all along, it starts to agree with me at this point. But let's back up to this point. After I played knight e5 here, with this tricky attack on the queen and the bishop, there's another way to take. And the chess engine, I guess the chess engine is pinning its hopes on this other line, thinks that black could take with the knight here. Knight takes, bishop takes, and then the knight drops back to f7 to shield that rook from the bishop. And there's not a whole lot going on here, so it seems like I haven't, well, I have open lines for those bishops still, but are they really doing a whole lot? Anyway, after bishop g4, the chess engine recommends queen c6 and maybe rook to e1. You know, I'm putting my pieces on open lines. I've got the bishop pair, but well, this is still a long game, and it has a kind of funny looking but apparently very solid defensive configuration here on the king side, and the chess engine is rating this as about even. I still prefer white here. I think white has the chances for the advantage. You know, I'm going to put my rooks on open files. I'm going to start pushing pawns forward and looking for opportunities to create some weaknesses on the king side. But I guess black can defend against these threats. Anyway, that would be best play for black, to take with the knight. He took with the pawn, and I took the bishop. He kicked my bishop, I kicked his queen. And now this is a pretty interesting situation here. He played knight to f5, as I mentioned before. And that is the top choice of the chess engine, but black still seems to be worse after that. You know, I wondered why he didn't just move the queen, but it seems like the problem is there's no good square for the queen. For one thing, the queen probably wants to keep an eye on this e6 square, because the bishop coming in there with a check would be kind of annoying. So maybe the queen could try a move like queen to d6. That was one idea I had. I think that was the second choice of the chess engine. But just rook f to e1, and you see the problem is that there's a pin on that, not that way, there's a pin on that pawn because of where the queen is moved to, and it's a difficult pin to get away from, and it's difficult to bring more defenders to bear on that pawn. So it looks like I'm picking up some material here. So that seems to be winning. So I guess knight f6 is one of these moves. You don't want to play it. I mean, you're just running into a pin or creating a pin to save a queen. But you look at all the alternatives and they're all worse. So this was actually the least bad choice, so the best choice under the circumstances. So now I get to grab this pawn. He grabs back, and then I save my bishop by just dropping back to e2. So we can pause here, and the material is still even. I have 3 pawns to 2 over here and 3 pawns against 4 over here. But well, I've managed to create some weaknesses. In fact, this d pawn is a pretty big target, and I've got the absolute bishop here. I have 2 bishops against 2 knights with open lines. This should be pretty comfortable for white, and the chess engine now agrees with me. Okay, so he played queen f7. Still, the action is on the king side, and he's going to try and get some counterplay going. Maybe he can stir up some trouble with the knights. I went rook a to d1. He went knight back to c6. He's thinking of pushing that d-pawn forward and dissolving his weakness. And I played bishop f3. I thought, well, I want to get the bishop off of that open file. And I had some ideas if he pushes that d-pawn forward, which he did. He played d4 immediately. Actually, you know, I'm piling up on this pawn, so I'm kind of provoking it to come forward. The chess engine says the best move here is... actually, I can't say that. I think the chess engine rated all of these as about even. But an alternative here is knight f to e7, still leaving white with an advantage, but just trying to defend that pawn where it is. It's just kind of a sad move to make because you know, black is going into a pretty defensive position there. So instead, I'm going for that. He went with d4, and I think he's still okay, although I'm probably better, and maybe, yeah, I think I win a pawn in all cases here. So probably at this point I'm starting to get a winning edge. So here's a point to think about. I wasn't quite sure at some point what the right response was. My plan was to take on c3 and then grab this pawn, and you know, it's worth giving up the bishop pair if you can win a pawn for it. And this looked like it would be a good pawn. It would be a passed pawn, maybe even a protected passed pawn if I get in the c3 move. So that looked like a good exchange for me. But as I was looking at this position, I started to worry about, what if after I take his knight, he doesn't take back right away, but he takes on c3. And I wasn't really sure what to do about it at that point. So I thought about this move for quite a bit. And then I went ahead and played it because I could not find anything better. And I didn't want to just take and have him grab that pawn back right away. He's got the 2 knights trained on that pawn, so I can't hold on to it. So I took off this knight. And then he went ahead and took on c3. If he takes the bishop, then I will just take here. And this pawn is well defended. And now he's got the doubled pawns. And plus I have an extra pawn on the king side. So I think this is a winning game in the long run. It would still be a long game, but with a pawn up and a good end game in store, you know, all the winning chances are mine, and it probably is a win with good technique. So instead, though, he took here and hit my queen. And at this point, you might want to pause the video and see if you can spot a tactic for white. Turns out there is a tactic for white in this position. Okay, I am going to give the answer away now, so you pause the video if you want more time to think about it. The answer is bishop takes rook, because when I take the rook, I'm hitting his queen. And even though my queen is hanging, his queen is hanging, and he resigned here because I come out of this a whole piece up. He has to, well, let's see. He could take the bishop. And then I take the pawn, and what is this? Yeah, I have 2 rooks and a minor piece. He has 1 rook and a minor piece. Yeah, so I'm a whole rook up. And if he takes the queen, then I take the queen. And he can take my bishop. Probably needs to. That's with check, and I can take this pawn. So I am still a whole rook up. I have 2 rooks and he has 1, and I've destroyed his advanced pawn there, so he doesn't have any chances with that advanced pawn. So after this move, bishop takes e8, he resigned, and that was the end of the game. So I thought there was an important lesson there, which is that let's back up to this point here. You know, I was calculating the sequence. Bishop takes knight, and I realized he could take either my bishop or he could try and throw in this move here. And I was really only thinking about queen takes. And but when we got to this position here, I didn't just automatically take, even though I'd calculated out in advance that that would still be okay for me. I thought, I'd have pressure on this pawn, and he would have to take my pawn. So I think I would still be fine. And the chess engine rates white as better, even in that spot. But instead of automatically playing the move that I had calculated in advance, I paused and looked at this position and looked for tactics, and I found one. So that's the lesson: is that even if you have calculated a sequence in advance, and your opponent is playing exactly the moves you expect, you shouldn't just automatically follow the moves that you planned out in advance, unless it's a blitz game and you need you need to move quickly. But in normal games. And even in blitz games, when you have time to think for a little bit, each move in a tactical sequence, you should be looking for improvements as you go. And sometimes those improvements can be game-ending, because there's a big difference between this position where I'm a whole rook up versus the other position where I'm just, let's see, say queen takes, pawn takes. If we compare these two positions, maybe I'm a little better. I have his doubled pawns to play against, and a bishop versus a knight on an open board. I might still go on to win. The chess engine gives me an advantage, but it would be a long game and there'd be opportunities for me to screw up. Whereas when I paused at this point to spot the improvement, that just ends the game immediately. Okay, so that's your chess lesson for this video. And so after 4 rounds, I have 2.5 points, 2 wins and a half point from the bye, so 2.5 out of 4. Doing slightly better than average and against opponents that were on average higher rated than me. So a good tournament so far. And I will be back soon with round 5 coverage. See you then.